After a week of apologies to parents in China and in New Zealand, Fonterra bosses have fronted up to say sorry to the government. The apology was accepted, but it seems Fonterra's assurances weren't. Ministers Stephen Joyce and Nathan Guy made it clear they won't be leaving Fonterra to run its own inquiries into the contamination crisis. Joyce says the government will be running its own investigation into the food safety scandal that's had far-reaching consequences for the dairy industry and possibly all of our export markets. I'm joined now by Trade Minister Tim Groser in Nelson at the National Party conference this morning. Good morning, Minister. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Morning, Rachel.
Has Fonterra done enough, do you think, now to bring an end to this crisis?
Rachel, I've had a very strong view since I first heard of this at, I think, precisely 6:23 p.m. on Friday about how to handle this situation. One was to focus everything from the government through to Fonterra on the immediate issue of finding the contaminated product and working also on something equally important, getting ourselves in a position where we could assure consumers, both in our own country and overseas, of which products were safe. The second stage is, let's call it loosely and deliberately, the blame game stage. And I think it has always been better to avoid pronouncing judgment until we had the facts on the table. Now, if you ask me, is Fonterra doing enough with respect to the first phase? My answer would be absolutely yes. Fonterra are leaving no stone unturned to help us and uncover the contaminated product. Obviously, we're making very, very considerable progress. When it comes to the second stage, let's wait and see what the various inquiries turn out.
Have they brought it to an end now, though? Is this the end? Have we got the end of the revelations now?
Well, obviously we hope so, but nobody can ever give you an unqualified assurance that something is not going to happen that nobody is aware of right now. But that's certainly one sense, and let's just hope that that proves to be the case.
The Chinese Ministry of Commerce on Thursday said that New Zealand needed essentially to strengthen its supervision of exported dairy products. What are you doing? What is the government doing to meet that request?
Well, I mean, that's a central question that the second phase of this whole business needs to be directed to. It's one of the most important questions. But let us all agree on this. We've got over 100 years of record, unmatched by any country in the world, of putting safe, high-quality food on the tables of families. That did not disappear with one accident. Or
does it? Because that's the issue here when you're talking about infant formula here. OK, commentators say in China they would expect heads to roll. With your knowledge of this relationship, do you think China will want to see this?
Well, putting aside the colourful phrase, if people have broken the law, there will be consequences. If people have not followed procedures, there will be consequences. But as I keep on saying, let's wait and get the facts out on the table. And one of the reasons I'm so strong on this is because while I'm not trained as a scientist, I do sort of understand empiricism, and I do understand from the complex microbiology around this, people can be a little surprised about what happens when the full facts get out on the table.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that we need to get top-level independent scientific advice to tell us what the actual facts were. Because right from the start, while we had no option but treat it as dangerous and take extreme measures to isolate it, we still don't really know if it was dangerous. That's one of the underlying facts in this whole process.
Where do you see the situation going in terms, and I'll come back to that earlier point that I made about China wanting to see someone accountable for this, that the management system can't remain in place at Fonterra when we've had yet another issue here?
Well, we've had three issues, and they're quite distinguishable, actually. Unfortunately, they've come one upon the other in terms of timing. The first issue was inadequacies on the New Zealand side to do with certification. That was never an issue about food safety. The other was the issue around DCD. And the reality is this. There is a standard of safe level of consumption in milk of DCD. It's set by the European Union. And we were told you'd have to drink a swimming pool of milk with the levels found in our DCD.
That doesn't stop the scare, though, does it, for people feeding babies milk?
So we have got to look at the underlying realities, but it must be a fact-based analysis so that we come out. We don't want to fix the wrong problem.
Sure. And we can discuss it here in New Zealand in this way, but what we can't do is control how China's state media essentially is reporting this. And if you look at the way they reported about the DCD situation, if you look at what's happened in the last week or so, how the Chinese have been pretty strong about not being happy about this, do you think there is a conscious policy here coming out of China about the way New Zealand is being portrayed?
Well, I read the Xinhua article you're referring to, and it's, yes, it's pretty ugly. It's not what we want to see in the Chinese media about our own country. But as I say, you know, that's understandable in the circumstances. What I want to emphasize is that the Chinese government's reaction has been extremely measured, very professional, and I'm delighted with the Chinese government's reaction.
Yes, but of course the media is, you know, that editorial wouldn't have gone out. It's a Chinese state-controlled media. That editorial would never have gone out without top-level approval for that. So, well, you know, there's two messages here, isn't it? And that's the message that the Chinese public are getting, surely, from the Chinese government.
And we'll have to sift through. There's apparently a huge volume of comment in the Chinese media, and that is one of them, but it's not the only voice that's being heard, as you would expect in a situation where information is very, very confusing.
Do you think Fonterra and New Zealand business in general here has taken the Chinese a little bit for granted?
Well, I think there are issues around the speed of our expansion, and I am on the public record well before any of these incidents occurred on this. I mean, I think there's a fair question to ask, not just of the government, but of companies. Are you undercooked in China? The speed of the expansion has been so rapid that people have got to ask, have you got the right HR strategies in place? Have you got the right people on the ground? I mean, I realise it's not an easy question, but no, for me, this is a very important and open matter. OK, and then to what extent, Minister, is this also a little bit about cultural ignorance too? Well, cultures always have problems interpreting each other. None of us can pretend we're not steeped in Mandarin to understand Chinese culture, but you know, some of us have been up to China 30 or 40 times over the last 30 or 40 years. We have a reasonable idea, but we can always improve it. All right, Trade Minister Tim Groser, thank you for joining us this morning live from Nelson.